Alright, so I didn't see this movie with a large audience, but I'm pretty sure that if you did see this, and please confirm to me in the comment section down below if this did happen in your screening, as soon as Andy says talk to me, I wanted to get up and cheer. I don't know why, it's just, I wanted to. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel, and today we are reviewing Bring Her Back, directed by Danny and Michael Philippou, starring Sally Hawkins, Billy Barratt, Sora, Wong, and Jonah, Wren, Phillips. This is their sophomore directorial effort after their 2022 film Talk to Me, which immediately set them at the top of my list of upcoming horror filmmakers to keep an eye on. And this film once again proves that their stranglehold on the viscerally disturbing side of horror is unmatched.
We can bring her back.
And of course, I'll be getting into spoilers for Bring Her Back, as there's so much about this movie that I want to get into. So if you haven't had a chance to watch it just yet, and you're a fan of Talk to Me specifically, definitely check this movie out, come back, and let's get into it. So what is this film about? Well, we follow Andy and Piper, who are step-siblings that suffer the loss of their father after an accident at the very beginning of this film, leading them to being placed in foster care. They are set to live with Sally Hawkins' character as Laura, a trusted foster mom on paper, but as our characters slowly discover, she has her own haunting grief from the loss of her own daughter, causing her to do some truly disturbing things to bring her back from the dead. The Philippou Brothers have shown in both of their films thus far that they deeply care about characterization over anything else, and similar to Talk to Me, this film is much less interested in how everything works in terms of explaining the concept of the horrors inside this film, because it's much more interested in why these characters in particular are the ones experiencing these horrors. So let's get into these characters, starting with Andy and Piper, who are our main leads that we follow inside of this film. The beginning of this film, for some reason, gave me serious Hereditary vibes, and I think this is because the film opens up with these siblings at a loved one's funeral, but the dynamic between these siblings are very different from that of Hereditary. I actually really love the dynamic between Andy and Piper throughout the entirety of this film. Piper is blind, which despite her best efforts to befriend kids around her school, really only has Andy to look out for her, and you also kind of get a sense that Andy really only has Piper as well inside of his life. Their bond is very strong, and their ability to say the word grapefruit when they need the other to be honest was a quick way to show us how much they trust one another. And as most great films do, when you set up a dynamic and rule like this, the filmmakers find all the best ways to break that dynamic to add conflict between these two characters. Andy had a very troubled life growing up. He was beaten by his father, who clearly had failed with his first attempt at a family, and when he married Piper's mother, it was a reset point for him to start all over again, but better this time around. Because of Piper's blindness, it was easier for both their father and for Andy to hide this abuse from her, mainly out of protectiveness over, not showing this girl the ugliness of the world. And before Andy really had any protective nature over Piper, he at one point hit her, both out of jealousy of the time his parents spent paying attention to her over him, along with the mirroring abuse he had seen his father give himself. And we see this pattern of lies that Andy gives Piper throughout the entirety of this story, most of which are in good faith in order to hide the ugliness of the world from her. This includes the little white lie about OLLIE, not the foster kid living with Laura, who is very strange right from the start. As the film progresses, we learn the disturbing reasons as to what Laura is up to. She is able to sow the idea of Andy being a liar to Piper, even when she says grapefruit, that tears a hole in the trust that they had for one another, which was one of the more clever aspects of Laura's manipulation. And because both Piper and Andy are put into this foster care situation, and Andy is reaching the age of 18, which means that he can, take guardianship over Piper, they honestly both just want each other to kind of move on past all the horrors that they had already experienced inside of their past, all the trauma, specifically when it comes to Andy's character having seen all these traumas and trying so desperately to keep all these horrors from his little sister. They just kind of want to move on from everything, and so this makes them the perfect victims for Laura's manipulation, because they are the innocents in this situation. As we'll find out here in terms of how the horrors in this movie works, that they are essentially needed as sacrifices in order for Laura to bring her daughter back. So let's get into how this all works, because I think that the horror concept that this movie has, in a similar sense to Talk to Me, is one of the biggest selling points inside of this movie, because it's a really fascinating concept. The film opens with some truly disturbing images from the cult-like ritual that is sprinkled throughout the marketing for this film. These sequences play out in a similar way to the movie itself when compared to the marketing. You really only see these events out of context in home videotapes that Laura watches. She's definitely an outsider outsider looking in when it comes to her connection with these tapes and this cult, trying to learn what this ritual is and attempting to replicate it for her own self-benefits. We never learn how she got these tapes or any more details on who is in the videos themselves, but that is very much not the point of this film, which might bother some in the same way that the hand in Talk to Me wasn't necessarily super explained inside of that film. We see that she has made a circle around her home, enclosing the ritual that is being performed at this point on OLLIE. He is mute, his head is shaved, he has a strange red birthmark underneath his right eye, and he also has a knack for harming the house cat along with himself, which we'll see later on is his hunger that is growing as this movie goes on. Jonah Wren Phillips is completely unsettling for every second he is on screen, and the slow evolution of this kid from seeming somewhat normal to slowly becoming more mangled and enlarged from eating the body of Laura's daughter, which I'll get into in a second, is one of the more disturbing elements inside of this entire film. So let's get into this ritual itself, which has 3 main steps. Well, I guess 4 main steps. We don't really get to see the first step. The first step, I guess, would be to get this vessel, to get a hold of this, devil or angel or whatever it is that she needs to perform this ritual. In Laura's case, this is OLLIE. This is the devil that she's using to perform this ritual, who at the start of the events of this film is already possessed. So we don't get to see that step of this film, but in other images throughout the marketing of this film, we've seen this type of character, somebody who has a shaved head, somebody who has an enlarged stomach from, presumably eating the bodies of whoever they're trying to bring back from the dead. We see this type of character scattered throughout the marketing, throughout all the videotapes, and so at some point in the past, Laura already performed this ritual to get this kid as the vessel that she needs to perform this task. But one thing that we do know is that this kid is actually Connor Bird, who was kidnapped by Laura and has been deemed missing for some time. I'm also just kind of assuming that this kid probably went missing around the time that Laura found out that Piper was going into the foster care system, because Piper is so similar to the daughter that she lost. This kind of probably sparked the idea and the want and the drive for her to seek out this kid, to kidnap him, to make him this vessel in order to perform this, ritual, because Piper is a mirror image of the daughter that she had lost. The next 3 steps are shown in videotapes, which are subtitled Mimic the Death, Consume the Old Body, and Purge the Soul into the New Body. So she essentially needs to drown Piper, which is how she lost her daughter in the first place. She has the body of her original daughter kept on ice inside of the shed, which she's been feeding to OLLIE in the middle of the night, which is one of the more disturbing elements of this film and completes the second task, that second step of consume the body when it comes to this ritual. And once those 2 steps are successful, OLLIE, or the angel/devil that possesses him, will purge the soul of her daughter into the new body of Piper. My favorite sequence in this film was when Andy was left alone with OLLIE, leading to him chewing on the knife, which was incredibly gory and one of the more disturbing elements of this film that will be stuck in my mind for quite some time, in a similar sense to the kid in Talk to Me slamming his head on the table. And that's just absolutely horrific sequence. This one definitely matches that for this film for me. But through this sequence, you do learn a lot about these characters, because again, this movie is more interested in the why these characters are going through this rather than, how this is all happening in the first place. You see that despite his teenage angst, Andy is a good kid who thinks OLLIE is being treated poorly. He tries to get him food, which very much backfires on him, but he's also able to begin to communicate to him through writing. This does eventually lead to him learning the true identity of this kid as Connor Bird, but it also leads to the greater confusion and rising distrust that Piper gains for Andy. When OLLIE is convulsing outside the circle when Laura gets home, Piper is not told what happened. She only hears OLLIE in agony, Andy is freaking out, and Laura is blaming Andy for everything that has just happened. But despite all of this, you still see Piper trying to comfort Andy as he is once again experiencing something truly traumatic while Piper was spared due to her blindness. You also learn a lot about Laura through this sequence as well. She rushes inside the home to perform the ritual on OLLIE, which we learn is to keep the devil inside OLLIE, as she still needs him in order to perform this ritual to bring her daughter back. You see more of the tapes, which explains the ritual, but you also see that she is essentially learning as she goes. This is not normal for her. She is desperate, and through her desperation, you see her grief. Sally Hawkins is phenomenal inside this film, and make sure this character is a lot more than just some creepy foster mom that is in tune with the occult. I honestly really like the development of this character, because the first time you see her, there's a lot of weird and just off-putting things about this character when, she shows the stuffed dog to Piper, which is really creepy and kind of an overall metaphor to what is going to become of Piper if she's successful inside of this ritual. But it's not all bad. There's a great moment inside this film after the funeral where, she asks Piper Piper and Andy what they want to do. And of course, Piper gives some snarky remark in terms of, I think, kicking Andy in the balls, but Andy says he just wants to get wasted, and that is exactly what they do. And you have a really fun party sequence of all these characters getting drunk together, which is honestly the only real light moment inside this entire film. Ollie was getting more and more unhinged throughout the entirety of this movie as his hunger grew from, being something that was somewhat manageable to something that could not be contained whatsoever, which led us to him chewing on the knife, which I already talked about that, but him also chewing on the table was one of the most disturbing things inside of this movie. It was really gnarly, and him taking a bite out of Laura's arm was also really gross and gruesome. But it's not just Ollie that is becoming more and more unmanageable as the runtime goes on, it's also Andy, because this is a character that very desperately wants to move on with Piper, because that is the one person that he has left in this world. And when he finally does go to CPS and he gets the woman to go all the way back to the home, and there's a very tense sequence where Laura has to quickly scramble to try to clean the entire house because she heard the voicemail that's Andy left for Piper that shows that this woman is about to come over to their house. Her desperately trying to clean everything, trying to make everything seem normal, was a very tense sequence as well. And of course, this goes terribly wrong because this woman is going to find out that terrible things are happening inside of this home. And this is, of course, where bodies start to drop in the last 20 or 30 minutes of this film. She, of course, runs over the poor woman who just wanted to see if these kids were safe inside of this home. But she also drowns the Andy character, which at this point, my mind was spiraling. And because she drowns this character, I thought maybe this is going to go terribly wrong, and Ollie's going to purge the soul of her daughter into his body instead of Piper's, which would be kind of a backfiring thing because she did not mean to kill Andy, or at this point, she just wanted to get rid of Andy. And by drowning him, maybe that could have turned things in a way that she didn't want, but I'm glad that was not the case, because what we got as the ending of this film was much more intimate and much more character driven, which I really enjoyed. She eventually does bring Piper back to the house to perform the ritual, and Piper is essentially standing in a house that is completely dismantled and destroyed, but of course she cannot see anything. There's a brilliant shot of her standing inside of the living room with blood scattered across the floor, but she cannot see anything that is happening. The spirit of Ollie through Andy's voice is kind of calling her upstairs, to which you get a very disturbing sequence where she reaches out and feels the head of Ollie and sees that both Andy and Laura lied about the appearance of Ollie, which kind of clues her into something being terribly wrong here. She eventually hides in the bathroom, which is where Andy's body is, which mirrors the entire opening sequence of her also finding her father's body inside of the bathroom and reaching down and feeling the corpse of her loved one, essentially, which is another very disturbing moment here. And you get to see her try to struggle and fight for her life to try not to be drowned by Laura's character, which was extremely hard to watch. But this is where this movie takes a turn that I was not expecting, that I really did appreciate, because Laura is not a truly terrible and despicable person. She does terrible and despicable things in the name of her daughter because of her overwhelming grief, but in the moments as she's drowning this other child, she realizes that she can't do it, and she lets Piper go. I really felt for her in this moment, even though this has been the character, the antagonist of the story, a character that has been really creepy and unsettling and terrifying. Of course, it's Sally Hawkins, and so her performance really does exude all those emotions too inside of this film. But by the ending of the story, honestly, I almost brought a tear to my eye to see this character fail at drowning this character, to let her go, to let Ollie go as well, who ends up jumping out of the circle, and the devil is purged out of him, and he becomes the normal kid again. And so Ollie gets to live, or I guess Connor Bird gets to live, and Piper gets to live. She's also the one who's able to get away, and Laura ends up bleeding out inside the pool holding the corpse of her daughter, which I think is very poetic and very haunting image to leave this character on by the ending of the film, which I thought was just beautiful. And of course, the film ends off with Piper listening to the audio recorded message that Andy had left her, which I think is a beautiful note to leave this movie on. And when it comes to negatives of this movie, I think I would actually compare it to the negatives that I had with Jordan Peele's Us, which was also the sophomore effort from Jordan Peele. And I think that those two movies are also very comparable, because as you're watching the movie itself, it's phenomenal. It's very well directed. It's visually stunning. The performances are great, and the story is really engaging, and you're very invested in the characters. But as soon as the movie ends, and as I was writing this review, I was finding all these plot holes and all these logical inconsistencies in this movie that I was really struggling with. Like when it comes to my favorite sequence in the movie with the kid chewing on the knife, I don't know why Andy would offer the kid to eat the fruit off the knife itself, and then he sets the knife down in front of this kid who then starts chewing on the knife. That was really dumb. Why did Andy not reach out to the police as soon as that happened, even when he's convulsing? Just take him to the hospital. Like, what are you doing? There's so many things that Andy did in this movie that just didn't make sense in hindsight. There's also the moments where Laura brought Piper to this sporting event, I guess, which is where she was while all the terrible stuff was happening with Andy and the CPS agent and everybody just dying inside of the home before she goes back and picks her up, which The editing in that was also very confusing because, you know, it showed her driving off with her and then dropping her off, and then also we're back here and it doesn't show, you know, Laura going back to the house. And there's just a lot of visual things and editing things of people ending up in different places in this film that felt confusing to me. There's a lot in this movie that you can really pick apart if you really try to, you know, pick this movie apart for, but in a similar way to Us, I don't think any of that really matters, because in the moments of watching this film, which I do desperately want to watch this movie again, because I'm sure there's a lot of little details of this movie that I missed the first time around, as you're watching it, you don't care about any of that stuff. And so yes, this movie is riddled with plot holes and little character inconsistencies that I think would bother some people, but at least for me, I honestly don't care about a lot of that stuff in a very similar way to how I feel about Us. So I think this is a very great, you know, follow-up film to Talk to Me. I think Talk to Me is technically a better movie, but I found the characters here more engaging. I think that the Philippou brothers are reaching a point in their directorial career where, yeah, I think that they are great filmmakers. That Talk to Me wasn't just a one-off. It wasn't an accident. They are great filmmakers to look out for, and I, again, cannot wait to see what they do next. But those are just going to be my thoughts on this film. And of course, if you did enjoy this review, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. I believe I'm seeing The Life of Chuck next week, so I'll probably have a review out for that pretty soon here. I think I have a screening for it on Sunday, which I'm very excited to see that movie. It's one of my favorite directors of all time in Mike Flanagan, so I cannot wait to see what that movie has in store for us. And of course, I have movie reviews here every single week, along with, you know, I just wrapped up my review series for The Last of Us Season 2, which I absolutely did love, so check out my reviews for that as well on my channel. So thanks everybody for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one.